Welcome to Anews. I'm Umar Taslim and you're watching Turkish Diplomacy. On today's episode, Daily Sabah's editorial coordinator, Dr. Mehmet Çelik, and political analyst Javed Rana will be joining me to discuss Canada's new Prime Minister, the war in Ukraine, and rising tensions between nuclear-armed neighbors, India and Pakistan. But before we begin our discussions, let's take a look at this news report.
Where there is no law enforced to stop Israel, there is chaos, anarchy, and mass killings amounting to genocide in Gaza, which appears imminent to be replicated in the West Bank without immediate international intervention. The ICJ has also issued provisional measures requiring Israel to allow humanitarian aid into Gaza, which Israel's actions directly undermine. Regarding the situation in Gaza, Israel's legislative actions further violate the three sets of provisional measures ordered by the ICJ in the case of South Africa versus Israel. On March 19th, 2 UN guest houses were hit in Deir el-Bala in Gaza middle areas, killing 1 team member of the UN ops and injuring 6 more UN staff, some of whom sustained life-altering injuries. Türkiye is deeply concerned about Israel's persistent non-compliance with its obligations under international law. On top of its incessant crimes against the Palestinian people, Israel's obstruction of humanitarian aid, targeting of UN facilities, and harassment of UN personnel not only exacerbate the suffering of the Palestinian people, but also compromise the rule-based multilateral system, undermines the credibility of the international legal order, and seriously weaken the effectiveness of international bodies such as the UN and legal instruments such as the 4th Geneva Convention. Therefore, Turkey respectfully requests the ICJ to issue an advisory opinion that reaffirms Israel's obligations under international law, paves the way for taking measures to prevent further violations of these obligations, and underscores the importance of respecting the presence and activities of the UN, other international organizations, and third states in the OPT.
Welcome back to the program. Dr. Mehmet Çelik, a very warm welcome to you as well.
Thank you.
Dr. Mehmet, before we begin today's discussions, we have Alparslan Doğan, who is joining us from London. He's our London correspondent. Let's ask Alparslan what the latest developments were. Alparslan, welcome to the program.
Good morning from London. Of course, I gave you a little bit brief from the case. A Palestinian diplomat told the United Nations top court on Monday that Israel is killing and displacing civilians and targeting aid workers in Gaza, in a case that Israel criticized as a part of its systematic persecution and delegitimization. Israel denies deliberately targeting civilians and aid staff as a part of its war with Hamas and did not attend the hearing at the International Court of Justice. In the case, and in Hague, the Palestinian ambassador to the Netherlands, Ammar Hijazi, accused Israel of breaching international law in the occupied territories. Israel is starving, killing and displacing Palestinians while also targeting and blocking humanitarian organizations trying to save their lives. He told the court. The hearings are focused on a request last year from the UN General Assembly, which asked the court to weigh on Israel's legal responsibilities after the country blocked the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees from operating on its territory. Lawyer Paul Richler, representing the Palestinians, told judges that one of the Geneva Conventions not only lies down that the occupying power must agree to relief schemes on behalf of the populations, but insists that it must facilitate them by all the means at its disposal. The UN Under-Secretary General for Legal Affairs, Eleanor Hammarskjöld, she said that measures taken by the occupying power to ensure its security must be exercised in a manner that would not deny impartial humanitarian organizations such as the United Nations the ability to carry out relief schemes. Hearings opened as the humanitarian aid system in Gaza is nearing collapse. Israel has blocked the entire entry of food, fuel, medicine, and other humanitarian supplies since March 2. It renewed its bombardment on March 18th, breaking the ceasefire and seized a large part of the territory, saying it aims to push Hamas to release more hostages. Despite the stepped-up Israeli pressure, ceasefire efforts remain deadlocked. The World Food Programme said last week its food stocks in the Gaza Strip have run out, and in a main source of substance for hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, as many families are struggling to feed their children. The United Nations was the first to address the court on Monday, followed by Palestinian representatives. In total, 40 states and 4 international organizations are scheduled to participate. Israel ally, the United States, is scheduled to speak on Wednesday. The court will luckily take months to rule. Experts say the decision, thought not legally binding, could profoundly impact international jurisprudence, international aid to Israel, and the public opinion. The advisory opinions provide to clarify mean an expert on international law at the University of South Australia told the Associated Press News the governments rely on them in international negotiations, and the outcome could be used to pressure Israel into easing restriction on aid. Whether any ruling will have an effect on Israel, however, it's unclear. Israel has long accused the United Nations of being unfairly biased against it and has ignored a 2004 advisory ruling by the ICJ that found its West Bank separation barrier illegal. The Palestinian UN envoy Riyad Mansour told the reporters that the Palestinians were seeking justice and what an advisory opinion to allow humanitarian assistance to reach our people at the scale that they need, led by UNRWA, which is the brilliant, most beautiful success story of multilateralism and United Nations. On Tuesday, South Africa, and a staunch critic of Israel, will present its arguments. In hearings last year in a separate case at the court, the country accused Israel of committing genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza, a charge Israel denies. Those proceedings are still underway. While Israel was not in court, Foreign Minister Gideon Saar hit back at the case, and they still denying they didn't commit genocide, but million or billion people, they know, they saw it, there's a genocide, live genocide still continuing, and people are still struggling, and people are starving, and people are dying every day over there. That's all from London.
Paslan Duan, thank you for keeping us up to date on the latest developments from the British capital. Mehmet, let's turn our attention to you. Canada has a new Prime Minister. Let's start with Canada first. How are you looking at the new election win of Mark Carney? Now, there's another Liberal. The Liberal Party has won. How do you analyze this election win?
Well, first of all, I think there's a few challenges that Mr. Carney will face. Although this success should be highlighted because many had turned their attention to the rise in conservative votes due to the Liberals, led by Justin Trudeau, were having a sluggish moment at home, and with the Trump administration threatening Canada to be the new state, and Trump calling him a governor, and all these annexation talks. Liberals were failing to respond both the problems at home and also in their foreign policy, and also the economic concerns with the United States, as well as the economic concerns at home with rising inflation and housing crisis, etc. Now, I think the fact that Mr. Carney capitalized on the anti-Trump or the threat of the United States annexing Canada worked for him very well. So his election victory, we can say that was based on him, first of all, being a new face, fresh face in the politics. He's not a politician. He's relatively new in politics. He's an economist, and he had led Canadian Central Bank as well as the UK Central Bank previously. But the fact that he's a fresh politician without any baggage, as well as his anti-Trump rhetoric, I think worked very well against the Conservatives, who had seen a very historic rise in their vote. So, Mr. Carney's election victory, for now, I think it is something that needs to be highlighted, and it's something that should be celebrated by the Liberals and those who voted for him. But there is a parliamentary election that will be coming soon, and he has to work very hard to overcome some of the issues at home. I mean, the parliament has been suspended since Christmas time, and there's a lot of policies that needs to be changed at home to address what is happening at home, to address economic concerns, to address the threats that comes from the southern border in terms of tariffs. So he has very limited time to do a lot. Now, in addition to the problem with the U.S., in addition to the, I think, some of the problems at home that he needs to concern, his own political career could also backfire. He's not a very experienced politician, although he has ambitions. He's a very good technocrat, but politics is something different. So I think time will show how he will capitalize this moment to show his political career is actually enough to challenge these struggles that he's facing. On the other hand, I think the fact that Mr. Carney is, in a way, being reluctant to reestablish. I mean, he's standing up to Trump, and this is something that could be dangerous for him, because when media is highlighting you so much under this anti-Trump umbrella, you should know that you're facing Trump, really. On the other hand, he is getting closer to the European Union. This is something that, he visited friends rather than traditionally when they visit United States. The Canadian leaders, they usually visit United States after the elections, but he visited France. This is something that is new. I mean, he wants to move towards the European side of allies so that he can reestablish the Canadian image or Canadian power vis-a-vis the United States oppression. So it is something that time will show, but he has a lot of challenges.
Mehmet, another story that's on the top of our agenda is a meeting between Britain, France, Germany, and Iran in Rome tomorrow. Now, Iran is negotiating with the United States as well over a nuclear deal that we could possibly see in the next few weeks or months. And now, at the same time, it's trying to fix its ties with the European Union. So how is Iran balancing both of these things at the same time?
Well, I mean, European side was also the part of the nuclear deal that started in 2015. But since that was stalled, now there's new talks. Of course, with the United States, there's a different dynamics that goes beyond just the nuclear deal. I mean, the Iran's confrontation with Israel, or their direct rivalry, or at least the enmity between Israel and Iran, it has a huge effect on the relationship between the United States as well as Iran. Iran is a regional actor that wants to widen its sphere of influence, which Israel sees as a threat, and the US acts in line with that. On the other hand, Europe wants to also make sure that Iran complies with the nuclear program and the concerns that comes with that. So I think what Iran says is that, look, we want to negotiate, we want to have this channel to be able to, we can negotiate the deals, we can talk about this nuclear program, but this shouldn't come with threats, because the European side is threatening the Iranian side. This rhetoric that could backfire from the Iranian side is not very, that rhetoric is not very well welcome. Nevertheless, the fact that they are meeting in Rome with France, UK, and Germany, I think this is a good news, at least in terms of diplomacy. We can see whether or not this will become fruitful. When there is no channels to discuss these matters, it leads to more build-up of more tensions. And if this rapprochement, or at least the channels of diplomacy being open between Europe and Iran, I think this will also have an effect on de-escalation of tensions in the region. Not just only specific to Iran's nuclear program, but it may even play as a factor affecting the sanctions that have been imposed on Iran. If Iran is able to satisfy the demands coming from European side as well as the United States. But I think this is a very small step that can turn into something more tangible. But at the moment, it is just talks, and we should be aware that it's a very fragile moment, that especially at a time where tensions are very high in the region.
We're now going to take a look at the tensions between India and Pakistan. And after we come back to the program, we'll have Javed Rana joining us from Islamabad.
Pakistan will not be the first one to resort to any escalatory move. However, in case of any escalatory move by the Indian side, we will respond very strongly. Pakistan has nothing to do with Pahalgam incident, period. We demand an independent and transparent probe by neutral investigators, as announced by the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Mohammad Shahbaz Sharif. It is unfortunate that India continues to weaponize unsubstantiated accusations and allegations as part of its disinformation strategy for narrow political ends.
Welcome back to the program. Javed Rana is joining us now from Islamabad. Javed, what are the latest developments in these tensions between India and Pakistan? Both sides have traded barbs. Top generals, top political leaders have discussed the issues as well. Tell me, what have you witnessed in the past 24 hours?
Very tense standoff, particularly on Pakistan's disputed border with India. It's a disputed region, Kashmir, divided between two countries. And the armies from the both sides are eyeball to each other. And then, obviously, both countries are logistically moving their weaponry, tanks, and heavy equipments. And I think as we speak, the situation on borders, not only in Kashmir, but also elsewhere along the Pakistan's international borders, particularly with the Sialkot. It's one of the Pakistan's bordering district. I think the border tension is is very high. Pakistan has started off the military exercises at some parts, and in so far as Kashmir is concerned, I think that is something which we need to look at very carefully, because just about 24 hours ago, India basically flew its fighter jets, and they could have possibly made certain incursions into Pakistani part of the Kashmir region. And then Pakistani fighter jets scrambled, and then the Indians, they went back. They retreated from the border airspace. Pakistan's airspace was not breached. Had that been breached, I think that could have started off some kind of a brief conflict. Luckily, that did not happen. But that does indicate underlying problems between two countries. That does indicate that how fragile this standoff is. At any particular point of time, anything can happen. Now, just 2 days ago, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has authorized its military chiefs to conduct any, I would call it a terrorist attack inside Pakistani side of the border. And they will choose themselves the targets, and they will choose the timing. Now, that has been the policy that we have been hearing from the Indian side of the border and from the New Delhi. And that does indicate that in one way or the other, probably India will go for some kind of incursions into Pakistan. What would be its shape? Will it be the repetition of what happened in 2019 when India had made incursions? Two of its fighter jets were shot down by Pakistan. One of the pilot was captured. I don't think India would like to repeat that humiliation, and probably this time their military tactics could possibly be different. It could be possibly use of missile, because missile doesn't carry any pilot. So I think that is one such possibility. But here, what I'm hearing from Rawalpindi and Islamabad, the Rawalpindi is a garrison city of Pakistan. It's the military headquarters. I think the indications are, in case India supposedly if it carries out a missile attack, then probably Pakistan go ahead with the two missiles attack. And Pakistan has already made its targets deep inside India. Now, India is basically a gambling on one thing, and that is that they would start off a conventional war, and they would not cross a red line where Pakistan could possibly use its tactical nuclear warheads. So I think that is a very dangerous calculation, and it could turn out to be miscalculation, and that could land this region into a bigger turmoil. And we have also heard that the US Secretary of State, he has spoken with the Pakistan's Prime Minister. Underlying message that conversation, which has been made public, part of which does suggest that USA is basically underlying that both India and Pakistan should open up the direct communication. Their military generals, the military operation who are dealing with the military operations, I think they had a communication. That is the only silver lining that we have seen so far. But again, at the same time, what is a more, I would say, is intriguing is that the Americans have also decided, and it has given a green signal to provide India some kind of high-tech weapons to New Delhi. Probably they are the maritime high-tech weapons, some kind of weaponry to the Indian Navy. So it looks like that the Americans are playing on the both sides of the divide. And inherently, this is an evangelical government in the White House. It is an Islamic-phobic government in the White House. Pakistan probably would not expect anything positive from the US behind the scene. What is a CIA's game behind the scene? Nobody knows. CIA might have its own objectives, and CIA might exploit this situation to contain China by creating a situation where China is pushed hard to militarily intervene into this, and that may be a kind of a strategy of the Americans to contain China.
Javed, tell me about Prime Minister Narendra Modi's meeting with RSS chief Mohan Bhagwat. What does that signal? Why has Modi met the chief of the RSS?
As we know, the RSS was at one point of time was banned in India, being a terrorist organization. And the Prime Minister Narendra Modi belongs to the RSS. It's a terrorist wing. It has 6 million volunteers who have been militarily trained, and their clear agenda is to annex Pakistan, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, and the other rest of the region, and expel everybody who consider himself to be Muslim from India if he does not convert back to Hinduism. Either convert back to Hinduism or leave India or get ready to be killed. That has been the strategy. I think in that context, that man is meeting with the Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So I think that is a very dangerous sign because this is essentially a distorted ideological organization. This is an organization which idolized Hitler's ideology. And though at this particular point of time, Israel and India, they are the strategic ally, but at the same time, the RSS, the core ideology is taken from the Hitler's ideology, to expel Muslims, to humiliate them. And for that to happen in a similar fashion as Hitler had introduced anti-Jews legislation before World War II in Germany, in a similar fashion, India has also introduced Islamic-phobic legislation in India, whereby the houses of the Muslims are being bulldozed, and the business centers of Muslims, they are being deserted, and many Muslims are there. They are in a very bad economic condition. Essentially, they have introduced a legislation whereby the names of who is the owner of the Muslim has to be written on their business center, which is an indication that there should not be any business dealing with that man. And I think at the same time, India has launched a campaign to boycott the business of the Muslims. I think in that context, this meeting is important. My fear is that in the event of a war, there is a stronger possibility that there could be a communal violence against Muslims. You may recall a couple of years ago in New Delhi and elsewhere in India, there have been communal violence. Hundreds of the Muslims were killed, and then their properties were bulldozed, they were burned to the ashes. And then I think that kind of a scenario could possibly be, we can foresee. And then we should not forget that they are under their very distorted ideology, they have a certain deadline, like first it was probably by 2022, now perhaps they shifted it to 2025, where they want a war. So, and at a time when India doesn't have any plausible evidence to suggest Pakistan's role in this attack in disputed Kashmir region, in which 26 people were killed, I think India is basically creating a situation, a warmongering, where they can have some kind of a military intervention in Pakistan, and their calculation could turn out to be miscalculation, and which could land this entire region into, I would say, a kind of a situation where possibly any of these two countries can use the nuclear weapons, and that would mean that both countries have the ability to annihilate each other, but they cannot win a war against each other after both countries becoming a nuclear powers. Now the strategic calculations have changed altogether. Now comparison that is being made that since Russia has not used nuclear weapons against Ukraine, so Pakistan and India would not be using nuclear weapons. This is a complete nonsense. Ukraine is not a nuclear armed nation. Why would Russia use it when the other side doesn't have the nuclear weapons? So I think these kind of a very misleading geostrategic calculation could land India in a great trouble. Its economy, which is at one of the leading economy in the world, I think that would be in a great trouble in weeks and months to come if there is any eruption of war.
Javed, just yesterday I was watching the statements from Pakistan's military leaders, and they said that they're not going to be the ones who will strike first. So they're still waiting for India's actions. And of course, you talked about nuclear weapons as well. It would be in nobody's interest to use nuclear weapons, not the public, not the countries, not the allies. But what India is doing is buying new jets. It has signed a deal with France as well, I believe, for the Rafale jets. So is that a show of military might, or is it just India trying to intimidate Pakistan?
I think in both ways, India essentially has not conceded to the fact that Pakistan is a sovereign state. Now, this French aircraft being scrambled in the airspace very close to the Pakistan's border. It is a very dangerous brinkmanship. Again, the point that I made earlier on, that possibly could have landed India into a war situation with Pakistan. The situation could not have been very different to what happened in 2019. Pakistani fighter jets could have locked the Indian fighter jets and could have shot it down, something similarly Pakistan did last time. What they are not understanding that Pakistan's even conventional weaponry is very sophisticated, though it has certain limitations as compared to India in terms of prolonging the war. But Pakistan does have that capacity. What India is not understanding, the Chinese factor, and the China could also use kind of a mechanism behind the scene whereby India's entire internet could be jammed, whereby whereby China can provide Pakistan the satellite service, whereby Pakistan's missile can have the clear guidance and it can target deep inside India. And then China can do a lot of things without overtly without clearly, publicly, militarily intervening into this conflict. I mean, now at this point of time, there are a lot of calculations are being made everywhere in the world capitals, particularly in Islamabad and New Delhi. But at the end of the day, everything boils down to one point. What will be Pakistan's response and how India would then will have responded back? At the heart of the entire discussion which is being taking place essentially is one thing: how to have a strategic edge on each other. Pakistan from 2019 had a strategic edge. India carried out airstrikes. 2 of its planes were shot down. 1 of its pilot was captured. It was a humiliation. Now, India wants to take a revenge of that humiliation. It needs something to do it where it could have some kind of a strategic edge. Now, I think you have not heard of that the 2 armed nuclear nations will have a conventional war. I don't recall anything. There was a Cold War between USA and the then Soviet Union, but they did not go for a direct war. But there is a complete madness. And that madness probably requires Prime Minister Modi to initiate a conflict with Pakistan on the basis of an evidence which is even less than hearsay. They say that Pakistani militants, they sneaked into Kashmiri part of the territory and then they carried out an attack. It was a gun battle. Do you think that they need to come from Pakistan by covering at least 250 kilometers zigzag mountains and there was no guns available in Indian part of the Kashmir and they had to fight over there? No, why, if that is the case, why the houses of some of the suspected militants in disputed Kashmir region are being bulldozed and burned? Because this looks like a homegrown problem. Probably these Kashmiris are very, very upset over the changes in the demography since 2020 when India forcibly, so-called legally, annexed internationally disputed territory. I think now Kashmiris are quite upset. Pakistan stopped aiding Kashmiris long ago. But again, India suspects, going by the past pattern, that somehow the other Pakistan has some role. Now, this is a more speculative without any plausible evidence. And that is what I think the Washington has also indicated, that there has to be an investigation. Now, without having a conclusive investigation, how could India go for a war? If that happens, then obviously India is going to face the consequences.
Javed, now, there are 2 sides to this story, right? There's a Pakistani point of view, and then there's the Indian point of view. And India, locally on Indian news channels, they've been spreading this information that they're going to target Pakistani cities, they're going to target Pakistani generals, they're going to target their nuclear weapons. But, you know, the international perspective that India is trying to portray is that it's Pakistan's fault, we are facing terrorism, we've faced this for years. But do you believe that the international community would be willing to look at the situation from New Delhi's perspective?
Largely because there is an there is a bias in the West against Islam and the Muslims. It's not specific to Pakistan. It goes. I mean, you can apply this formula across the board in the Middle East and elsewhere until these are the monarchs who play their agenda. Now, in case of Pakistan, I think somehow or the other it tried to demonstrate its sovereignty, though I think it is not an ideal situation. They do also listen to the Americans. Obviously, if you go on merit, Kashmir is a disputed territory, internationally accepted fact. There are 11 UN Security Council resolutions which call for the plebiscite. There are 11 UN Security Council resolutions which call for the demilitarization of the both parts of a disputed Kashmir region. So India, instead of doing that, they annexed it forcibly. First, it gave autonomy after the partition of United India, and then later on, 5-6 years ago, it also annexed it, something I explained early on. So in that context, Pakistan's case legally, internationally is very strong. But given the fact that India is a big market for the West, that is why their sympathies are with India. They will basically follow Indian narrative that there is a terrorism going on. Under UN General Assembly's resolutions in early 70s, any region where people are under oppression, they have the legitimate right to resist. In case of Kashmir, since there is a UN Security Council resolutions, therefore, any resistance to the Indian oppression, whether it is an armed resistance or otherwise, that is a justified. Now, killing of civilians, as happened in this case, that is not justified. And we do not know at this particular point of time that whether they were killed by the militants trained by India, because India has also its own set of militants inside disputed Kashmir region, and that is something which was conceded by one of the former RAW chief just recently. So again, we don't know exactly who is behind it. It could be possibly straight away an intelligence operation. There is a history of India conducting a false flag operation, but that is just one such possibility. So in a broader picture, a bigger question is at what point of time the international community can intervene. My understanding is there will be a situation, could possibly, if there is eruption of war, when Pakistan may try to go for a use of the nuclear weapons. And that fear could possibly, I think, lead the international community to intervene. I think that is the only scenario I foresee. Otherwise, the West is the least concerned about it. I think that would be a very, very terrible picture that would develop. That would be the last resort. But since there is some kind of a disparity in the conventional war between India and Pakistan, Pakistan's threshold of at what point of time it will use nuclear weapon is a very limited. Even it can use the nuclear warheads, which are known tactical weapons, which can be used within the radius of 25 kilometers in its own territory in case there is a mass mobilization of Indian military troops in Pakistani side. So again, it is a very dangerous scenario which is a building up. Now, what are the Indians' calculation? At what point of time they will go for some kind of airstrikes inside Pakistan? That remains unknown. But it is certainly is going to destroy Indians' economy. Now, their stock exchange are crashing, and they will crash further in weeks and months to come if this warmongering continues. This has to be settled down. Now, India is essentially thinking that they will go for a limited strike, there would be a limited conflict, and Pakistan would not hit back. You may recall in 1999, there was a Kargil conflict, which is a part of Kashmir, and it went on for 3 months. Pakistan was deep inside Kashmir. Pakistani troops were there. And then Pakistan was fearing that there may be opening up other borders, and Pakistan had deployed even the nuclear weapons at that point of time. In 2019, Pakistan had deployed its nuclear weapons because Pakistan has its right to defend it the way it wants. No country can impose what weapons should it use. But again, the bigger question is that no country is going to win this war. They have the potential to annihilate each other, but they cannot win any war in the event of there is a nuclear war, use of the nuclear warheads in the region.
Political analyst Javed Rana, thank you for being on the program and for your analysis from Islamabad. Dr. Mehmet Çelik, thank you for being on the program as well. And that wraps up this edition of Turkey's Diplomacy. From shifting alliances to rising tensions, the global landscape continues to evolve, often in ways that matter deeply to Turkey. Thank you for joining us, and we'll be back soon with more critical insights.